The 2007 college football season was an all-timer. From Appalachian State stunning Michigan in the Big House in Week 1 through Conference Championship weekend, the season delivered one twist after another from start to finish. But much like Game of Thrones, the 2007 season failed to deliver a finale worthy of the drama that preceded it. Instead, we got a straightforward affair in the title game, as LSU pulled away from Ohio State and won the national title comfortably. Nearly 20 years later, historical consensus agrees that LSU is the best team of a flawed group of contenders. But I question that consensus. In a year where every team was beatable, I can't help but think that the BCS system was the worst possible way to decide its champion. What if instead, there had been a 12-team playoff in 2007? Which teams would have made the field? And would LSU still have won it all? Or would another contender have seized the opportunity with a second chance? Let's start by establishing the bracket. Since the college football playoff rankings didn't exist at the time, I'll use the final BCS standings from 2007 to build the field. The top 4 seeds receiving first-round byes would have been number 1 Ohio State, number 2 LSU, number 3 Virginia Tech, and number 4 Oklahoma. That then leaves us with 4 first-round matchups, all hosted by the higher seed. Number 5 Georgia versus number 12 Florida, number 6 Missouri versus number 11 Arizona State, number 7 USC versus number 10 Hawaii, and number 8 Kansas versus number 9 West Virginia. Instead of simulating each hypothetical matchup, I've looked at the strengths and weaknesses of all 12 teams and compared their profiles to past national champions to figure out which ones had a realistic shot to win it all. So with the bracket set, let's run through the field. Remember this Hawaii team and its run-and-shoot offense that led the nation in scoring? The Warriors would not only have claimed the Group of 5 automatic qualifier spot, they'd have earned their place in the field outright, finishing 10th in the final BCS standings. Colt Brennan graduated as the NCAA's all-time leader in touchdown passes, but Hawaii's pass-heavy style also had its drawbacks, as he threw 17 interceptions. We saw the downside of this approach in their Sugar Bowl matchup when Georgia's defense overwhelmed them with 8 sacks and 8 turnovers in a 41-10 rout. Had the playoff existed, a first-round trip to USC would have awaited them, along with a similarly ugly result. Arizona State was one of the forgotten contenders of the 2007 season. The Sun Devils started 8-0 and climbed as high as number 6 in the AP poll before losing 3 of their final 5 games, which likely still would have been enough to earn them a spot in a 12-team playoff. This was a solid team without any standout traits, finishing 39th in scoring offense and 32nd in scoring defense. They also lacked elite NFL talent, with no future first-round picks on the roster. They closed their season with a blowout loss to Texas in the Holiday Bowl. Considering a superior Big 12 opponent in Missouri would have been waiting for them in round 1, it's hard to see their playoff run ending any differently. One of the great stories from the 2007 season was Kansas fielding its greatest team ever. The Jayhawks were the only team in the country to finish top 5 in both scoring offense and defense. Todd Reesing was one of the nation's most efficient quarterbacks, and receiving weapons Marcus Henry, Desmond Briscoe, and Derek Fine were all drafted to the NFL. On defense, Aqib Talib and Chris Harris formed a secondary of future NFL All-Pro corners, helping Kansas force the 4th most interceptions in the country. But Kansas played the weakest schedule of any non-Hawaii team in the field, facing only one ranked opponent during its 11-0 start. And only 7 players from this roster were drafted to the NFL, falling well short of the talent threshold most champions have historically met. Kansas overachieved their talent level, and that's part of what made this team so memorable. But feel-good stories are harder to sustain when the path to success requires 4 straight wins over elite teams. My first controversial take, and one of the driving forces of this exercise, is that Ohio State had no business playing for the national title in 2007. The Buckeyes' offense ranked just 43rd nationally in scoring. First-year starter Todd Beckman was turnover-prone, throwing 14 interceptions in 13 games, and their ground game wasn't dominant either. ranking 34th nationally in yards per carry. The schedule was another red flag, ranking 56th in the country, the third weakest in this field behind only Kansas and Hawaii. A big reason the Buckeyes avoided the two-loss curse that inflicted almost every other contender is that they weren't facing the same level of competition, avoiding a single team ranked higher than 20th until the national title game. And unlike almost every other team in this exercise, Ohio State doesn't get the benefit of a hypothetical projection. We saw this team in the actual BCS title game, and it lost in exactly the way that you would have feared, with 3 turnovers and an offense that stalled out until it was too late. Ohio State did feature a dominant defense, leading the country in scoring defense and featuring future first-round picks like Vernon Gholston, Malcolm Jenkins, and Cam Hayward. But history tells us that championship teams feature a high-functioning offense and a battle-tested resume, and this Ohio State team had neither. Virginia Tech put together an inspiring season in 2007, playing in the aftermath of the tragic campus shooting earlier that year. The defense was the backbone of this team. Virginia Tech ranked 3rd nationally in scoring defense, featuring playmakers all over the secondary like Cam Chancellor and Brandon Flowers, and finished 5th in opponent passer rating and 8th in interceptions. And up front, Bud Foster's aggressive scheme produced 47 sacks, the second most in the country. Like Ohio State, though, the offense struggled with consistency. The Hokies ranked just 54th in scoring, bounced between Sean Glennon and freshman Tyrod Taylor at quarterback throughout the season, and averaged only 3.3 yards per carry, which ranked 102nd nationally. They had an early chance to prove themselves in a road matchup with LSU, but instead were humiliated, losing 48-7 in a game that ultimately settled the race for the number 2 spot in the BCS title game. A quarterfinal matchup with Missouri would have been fascinating stylistically, but had they survived that, Virginia Tech would have run into LSU again, or a team operating at a similar level. Were the Hokies better in December than they were in Week 2? Definitely. But enough to close the kind of gap they displayed in Baton Rouge? I doubt it. Missouri was another program that produced one of its all-time seasons in 2007. The Tigers entered the Big 12 championship, ranked number 1 in the country, and in pole position to reach the BCS title game. But they lost to Oklahoma, spoiling their title hopes. But had Missouri been given a second chance in a 12-team playoff, they could have made serious noise. They had one of the most explosive offenses in the country, led by Heisman finalist Chase Daniel and freshman star Jeremy Maclin, an all-purpose threat who was equally dangerous as a receiver and runner. The question mark was their defense, which struggled against elite offenses, allowing 41 and 38 points in their 2 losses to Oklahoma. In this playoff projection, Missouri would have had a favorable home matchup against Arizona State, then faced a vulnerable Virginia Tech in the quarterfinals. Meanwhile, Oklahoma, the one team that clearly had its number, would have been on the entire other side of the bracket. A semifinal run was well within the realm of possibility, and when you get that far in a season like 2007, anything can happen. Georgia is the team everyone would have picked as their dark horse in a 12-team playoff. There was a lot to like about this squad. A future number 1 overall pick, Matthew Stafford at quarterback, a future first-rounder, Noshawn Moreno at running back, and a battle-tested SEC resume. Plus, they were red-hot down the stretch, finishing the season on a 7-game winning streak after a 4-2 start. Led by Geno Atkins and Marcus Howard up front, the Bulldogs' defense finished 9th nationally in sacks and allowed just 3.3 yards per carry. The offense was good, but not quite as dominant as people remember. Stafford was only a sophomore and a season away from truly breaking out. This was an offense that leaned on Noshawn Moreno in the run game and took care of the ball, seeking to control games rather than overwhelm teams. Ultimately, the Bulldogs' slow start cost them a shot at LSU in the SEC championship game and a direct path to the national title. But in an expanded playoff, Georgia would have been a serious threat. But as the 5 seed, their reward would have been a first-round rematch with a hungry Florida squad. Still furious after the Bulldogs' end zone celebration sparked one of the most infamous rivalry moments of the era. If that game had happened again months later, it would have been one of the most anticipated first-round matchups in playoff history. The reason for that is that Florida, the projected 12 seed, might have had the highest ceiling of any team in the field. The 2007 squad has become the forgotten Florida team of the Urban Meyer era, but much of the same talent that won it all in 2008 was on this roster, including 6 eventual first-round NFL draft picks. The offense was machine-like, ranking 3rd in the country in scoring, 2nd in pass efficiency, and 7th in yards per rush. Tim Tebow was at the peak of his powers, winning the Heisman after throwing for 30 touchdowns and rushing for 20 more. And Percy Harvin was the most explosive skill player in the country. The defense, though, was still a year away from dominance. Even with high-end talent like Derek Harvey, Joe Hayden, and Brandon Spikes, Florida ranked just 47th in scoring defense. The secondary was the biggest issue, finishing 72nd in passer rating allowed, and the pass rush was merely average as well, ranking only 48th in sacks. Ultimately, a 3-loss team is hard to sell as a deserving title contender, but in a season as chaotic as 2007, Florida might have had a real shot. This roster proved its championship ceiling the very next year, and it had already shown it could go punch for punch with LSU on the road. There isn't a single team in this field that Florida couldn't match up with, including Georgia. It would have taken a miraculous run, but the pieces were there. By advanced metrics, the best team in the country in 2007 wasn't LSU. It was West Virginia, who would have entered the playoff as the 9 seed. The Mountaineers were defined by Rich Rodriguez's spread option attack, built around QB Pat White and running back Steve Slayton. West Virginia averaged 297 rushing yards per game on 6.2 yards per carry, ranking 3rd and 1st nationally. The defense was impressive too, allowing just 3 yards per carry, while ranking 29th in opponent passer rating and 14th nationally with 42 sacks. After a midseason road loss to a red-hot South Florida team, West Virginia rolled to a 10-1 record and wrapped up the Big East title. But then came the disaster. Entering the final week ranked number 2 in the country, the Mountaineers needed only a home win over 4-7 Pitt to clinch a spot in the BCS title game. Instead, they turned the ball over 5 times, managed only 183 yards, and lost 13-9 as 28-point favorites. That loss cost West Virginia its title shot, but in a 12-team playoff, they still would have been firmly in the field. And this is exactly the kind of team nobody would have wanted to see. To me, the most impressive postseason win by any team in 2007 wasn't LSU beating an overmatched Ohio State team for the title. It was West Virginia destroying number 3 Oklahoma in the Fiesta Bowl, rushing for 349 yards on 8.9 yards per carry in a 48-28 demolition. If West Virginia could do that to Oklahoma, they could do it to anyone. They didn't have the elite talent pedigree of some of the other contenders, with no future first-round picks on the roster, but this was a team whose whole was greater than the sum of its parts. And it's a shame its title hopes ended with one collapse instead of a real chance to prove their mettle. I wouldn't call West Virginia's win over Oklahoma one of the most impressive of the year if I didn't think highly of this Sooners team. In a season where almost every contender had a glaring weakness, Oklahoma was one of the few teams that checked the boxes of a classic national title contender. The offense was absolutely loaded. True freshman quarterback Sam Bradford broke out immediately, leading the most efficient passing attack in the country with 36 touchdowns and just 8 interceptions. And he had elite talent surrounding him. Joaquin Iglesias, Malcolm Kelly, and Jermaine Gresham all became early NFL picks. DeMarco Murray and Alan Patrick formed a dynamic backfield, and future Hall of Famer Trent Williams was protecting Bradford's blindside. The defense wasn't dominant, but it was good enough, finishing in the top 20 in scoring defense. Curtis Lofton was an All-American at linebacker, and lineman Gerald McCoy flashed the potential that would eventually make him a top 5 pick. Talent wasn't the problem for this squad. 25 players from this roster were drafted to the NFL, the second most of any team in this playoff field. Their issue is consistency. At their best, the Sooners were good enough to overpower an elite team like Missouri. At their worst, they could lose on the road to a 6-7 Colorado team or get run over by West Virginia. Maybe that volatility would have shown up in the playoff, with a team like Georgia or Florida mauling them at the line of scrimmage in the quarterfinals. But time and again in the playoff era, elite talent tends to rise to the top, and a team with a future #1 overall pick at quarterback and one of the most talented rosters in the field would have had a real chance to make a deep run. The first team in my final tier is the obvious one. You know, the team that actually won the national title in 2007. It's well known that LSU was the first two-loss national champion of the BCS era, but people may forget that both of those losses came in triple overtime. Even when you beat this team, you had to survive them by the skin of your teeth. There's little to question with the Tigers' resume. They played a top 15 schedule, finished top 20 nationally in both scoring offense and scoring defense, and had 24 future NFL draft picks on the roster. The defense is what people remember most, featuring future top 5 picks Glenn Dorsey and Tyson Jackson on the defensive line. And you could argue the secondary was even better, ranking 3rd in pass efficiency defense and 4th in interceptions. On offense, Matt Flynn was steady, throwing well enough to keep the offense on schedule to balance out a strong run game. LSU survived close calls against Florida, Auburn, and Alabama, then needed a fourth-quarter comeback to beat Tennessee in the SEC championship game. But when the stakes were highest, the Tigers rose to the occasion, soundly beating Ohio State 38-24 to win it all. But if the Tigers had entered a 12-team playoff, their toughest test may have come much earlier than the title game. They may have entered the playoff as the #7 seed, but USC was by far the most talented team in the country in 2007. The Trojans had 35 future NFL draft picks on the roster, 10 more than any other team in this field. A huge portion of that talent was part of an elite defense, finishing 2nd nationally in points per game, 4th in sacks, and 6th in pass efficiency allowed. They featured multiple stars at every level: Cedric Ellis and Lawrence Jackson up front, Keith Rivers and Ray Malaluga at linebacker, and Taylor Mays and Terrell Thomas in the secondary. This defense was so talented that future first-rounders like Brian Cushing and Clay Matthews were fighting just to see time on the field at all. The weakness of this team, and the reason USC missed the title game, was the offense, which ranked only 37th in scoring and 76th in turnover rate. Injuries played a major role in USC's unraveling. John David Booty broke his finger against Stanford and threw 4 interceptions in a stunning home loss as 41-point favorites. He then missed the next 3 games, forcing Mark Sanchez into action before he was ready. Sanchez threw 4 interceptions in those 3 starts, including a loss at #5 Oregon that put USC's title hopes on life support. But when Booty returned for the final 5 games, the offense started to round back into form. USC scored 44 in a road win over #7 Arizona State, then dropped 49 on Illinois in the Rose Bowl, setting a record with 633 total yards. I buy that late season version of the offense much more than the injury-disrupted version from mid-season. To me, USC was exactly the kind of lower seed that's terrifying to face in a playoff. The first-round home game against Hawaii would have been a cakewalk, setting up the de facto national title game in the quarterfinals against LSU. And if USC won that game, I think the Trojans would have been favored the rest of the way. This was the highest ceiling team in the field, and playoff history tends to reward teams with overwhelming talent that peak at the right time. So if a 12-team playoff had existed in 2007, we'd have gotten one final flourish of chaos: Pete Carroll's #7 seed storming through the bracket to win it all.